read me romance. Read me romance. Read me romance. Read me romance. You could take a look in a book, that's fine. Or you could sit back, relax, and unwind and read me romance. Read me romance.
Welcome back, lady listeners.
Welcome back, lady listeners. It's Leah. We're here. Woo-hoo. We have a brand new book from Fiona Davenport. It's called The One I Want for Christmas. And I know it's October. And she was like, is this too soon? And I was like, never.
No, I did new releases today. And there was so many Christmas. I think they released them this week, October 1. If you go look at the new releases post, there's a ton of Christmas books. And there's a bunch of Halloween ones, too.
Yeah.
All the Halloween ones are paranormal, but they look like soft paranormal. If that makes any sense.
Yeah, yeah.
Like kind of witchy or spooky.
It's the time of year where I'm like, I want to put up my Christmas tree and I want to eat Halloween candy. I'm like, is there anything better? Nope. That's what I'm
waiting for October to be over because November 1, you know what we get?
What?
Starbucks Christmas cookie coffee.
I forgot how much you like that one. That one's is it the sugar cookie? Is that what it is? Does it taste like a sugar cookie?
I live in a small town, so I think they get too much order and it'll go all the way through January. I just jinxed myself.
Oh, fuck yeah. God damn it, you did. Now you're not going to see it. They're going to be like, look, we ordered it for that one girl in town, Mel.
December 25th, they're like, it's gone. I'm like,
and it's done. Shut the fuck up.
Usually I can get it for about 3 months. And I'll start checking like Starbucks around me because one will run out. And then I'm like, okay, I got to go to the other one.
Yeah. You know, they have isn't that when they do the white chocolate cranberry bliss bar? Fuck me. Yeah. Listen, my cousin Angela last year at our bake off, she made like those or whatever. You can find the recipe online that's like exactly like them. I ate those until I was sick. I'm not kidding. I was sick. I was like, please take these away from me. They were so fucking good.
I get so excited because I'm not into pumpkin spice. I like pumpkin pie, but I'm just not into the pumpkin things. And I'm just like, come on.
I don't love pumpkin pie or pumpkin spice. I mean, I get it, but I would prefer sweet potato pie. And to me, it's kind of the same thing, but I like the texture of the sweet potato better than I do pumpkin, which is why I think I like the sweet potato pie. But it just, I don't know, just cinnamon is okay. Allspice, I don't like it. You know, I don't really like that strong spice flavor. But like you give me a cranberry, a sugar cookie, you know, hot cocoa, those kind of winter flavors. Fuck yes.
Starbucks has the worst hot chocolate known to man.
Oh man.
Known to man. It's terrible.
It's the worst.
Good hot chocolate? IHOP.
Shut up. Are you serious? You know what though? I believe you because I feel like you've done the legwork on this.
I looked it up after I went there. They use whatever that red can is of cocoa in the store. That's what they use. And I started buying it. Oh. I forget what the brand it is, but it's the one that's in the circle red can.
I don't know that one. I'm just thinking about Folgers, and that's not the same thing. Okay, listen, I want to talk about Jenica Snow's book that you recommended a couple of weeks ago. It was called Big Bad Wolf. And the audio, I think, is only like 4 hours long.
The first one,
Yeah, the first one is a duet narration. It's an introduction to the series. And if you told me how hot this was, I just want to tell you, you did not convey just how hot this book is because holy shit, Mel.
It's so good. I said the audio is so good.
He is crazy.
Yeah, no, it's like one of the best audios. No, it is probably the best. You listen to way more audios than I do. So it is the best audio I've listened to this year.
It's so good. Like I would say it's up there. Butcher and Blackbird would be up there with it. That one would probably number one. This will be a close second.
The narration is just, well, the story's good. It's smutty, what we like. It's got the romance. He's obsessed. And then the narration is just so good.
So good. The narration's so fucking good. Oh my God, it's so hot. And not only that, he's a virgin. Like he's waited like 400 years so he could only have sex with his wife.
I'm still waiting for, I don't know if it's out yet, or maybe I just haven't got that far. There's a guy that keeps himself locked away, like a brother or something.
That's the brother. I think that's the second book, isn't it?
I don't think so. No, because I've gone to the second book, I think. I'll have to go back and look. But no, I've gone out. I remember going back and like looking for his book. I'm like, is this not out yet? Or maybe it was like 5 down. I'm like, God, I got a ways to go to get to him.
Yeah, because he mates at their wedding. Like he sees his mate at their wedding, but she's like the bride to a lichen king from Ireland. And so and she's got brothers and they won't let her mate to him because he's a feral lichen who like he was locked up or whatever because he went crazy, and they won't let her mate to him.
I think I know what it is. I haven't listened to it yet because I think it's one of the longest ones.
Oh,
I think it's really long, and I'm like, okay, I have to like prepare for this.
Yeah, you got to mentally prepare for a book that long.
I'm not great with pausing and putting things down, so I have to like slide some things to the back.
I would agree with it because once I started this one, I was like, yeah, I'm not stopping. I got to listen to the whole thing in one day.
But I love that this first one is like 4 hours. It's like perfect. Such a great taste. You get a great taste for the narration, the style of what you're going to get from the heroes, and like
there's a little world building. You know, they set up stories for they set up the story for the next one really well. You even get to hear from the heroine in that one too, in book 2 or her book. You get to hear her voice because she's Irish, but no, just it was such a great story. I loved how obsessed he was. He just could not stop talking about how much he craved her and her scent and how he didn't want to be away from her and he wanted to rub against her. And I was just like, oh. And he's just like, all I want to do is make her happy. That's all I want to do. Whatever that takes. I'll kill everyone if that'll make her happy. Yeah, that sounds amazing. Yeah, this is not unrealistic, right? So good though. The other thing I had is that we got an email from a lady listener, and I'll try to read a little bit of it. It is kind of a longer email, and I won't say her name just in case she doesn't want to be called out on it. But I thought it was a good topic to discuss. The subject is called Thoughts on Billionaire Books, and so she was like, let's see. All right. So anyways, I've got a controversial question for you. Billionaire books. Is there a downside? ? The way my simple mind thinks about this is that if billionaires have loads of money, way, way more than they need, then there's someone else who doesn't have enough. The great thing about books is that we can escape from the daily grind and see a snapshot of what could be. Ruby Dixon does an amazing job at this in Ice Planet Barbarians. So if a book is a chance to imagine another world, why is the one waitress escaping the poverty trap and hooking up with a billionaire aspirational? Loads of the other people in that world are stuck. Wouldn't it be better if there were no billionaires and that the waitress's work was valued and allowed her to make a living, and that she had a decent school for her kids and could afford health care and enough time off work and she includes an article down at the bottom that talks about this, and she said, I know it's not meant for me to tell other people what to dream of, but personally, I want stories of the Davids and the Union or community groups standing up to Goliath. Those guys take personal risks to protect others, and that's hot. So anyway, so she discusses a little bit further and gives herself, or talks about why she feels this way. And I thought it was a good conversation because I understand what she's saying. And my knee-jerk reaction is that I'm like, well, fuck it. I like reading about billionaires because they like money solves problems. I get what
she's saying. Like about the guy who forms the union at your work and gets everybody. I mean, that is
hot. Yeah,
that is hot. If I worked in a factory and there was this guy that got the union for us and he was fighting for all of us and working the lines and you were doing pickets with them, and that does sound hot.
Yeah.
I just don't know if I would pick it up because it's too much realism for me.
Yeah, same.
Like, I should be at a picket. I should be at a call center making calls for the election. I should be doing these things.
Yes.
So it almost makes me feel guilty when I'm reading.
Yes.
Like,
No,
with a billionaire, it's like,
true.
I'm not a billionaire. I'm not a waitress.
It's true. I actually
disconnected.
listen. I read a book earlier this year about Alyssa Cole, and so much of the book, it was a romance, but it was very the romance was very like off the page and not central to the story. But it was a great book, but it was very much about gentrification. And I just kept having these conversations with myself as I'm listening to it. Is like, okay, well, am I moving into a neighborhood that's being gentrified? How am I contributing to upward, the oppression of upward mobility and Black and people of color, Yeah. So it's like, those are like the ethical questions that I had while I was reading. And I understand that book was incredible and it was important and it made me think, and it was a thought-provoking story. And I feel like there is a place in my reading world for those books. But for me, when I write, especially, and also read too, on the other hand, is that it is escapism, and I guess I look at it too as like that's kind of and I don't think this person meant it to come from this way, but it does. No. But it does feel like it's misogynistic undertones, because if a man was writing about, like being an astronaut or like solving crimes or, discovering the Noah's Ark or whatever the thing is, the Ark or whatever, like discover Holy Grail, like discovering that, if he's on these adventures and doing these things, like that's not unrealistic. That's not like, just because this person, if a guy writes about, a detective or I don't know, maybe that's not a good example, but it feels like maybe because women enjoy billionaires that something's inherently wrong with it. Yeah. Is the knee-jerk reaction.
I just think it depends on the reader too. I am not an angst reader.
Yeah.
I do not do angst. I mean, few and far between an author can get me in, Melanie Moreland, or, it depends on who writes it. They could get me to read it.
Yeah.
If they're a really good author. But generally, I research my books out before I read them.
Yeah.
Because I want low angst, maybe even a touch boring.
Yeah. That's what somebody had described something the other day. They said, "Oh, this is low stakes." And I was like, I love that description because yes, I don't want like high stakes, like everything relies on this moment, angst or whatever it is that's in it. I don't want those kind of things that are going to make me just feel threatened.
Who always gives me that? Actually, we're Fiona Davenport. Her MC series, MC series always gives me that. It's like, I know when I check into that, she sends it to me. I'm like, this is just going to be lighthearted, fun, obsessed. He's all in. I know what I'm getting. I'll like even save it for a moment. I'm like, okay, I'm going to read this tonight or whatever.
Yeah. Low stakes. That's what I think a lot of what our books are, because there's not conflict to the central couple. It's usually conflict around them, which is again, like a low stakes situation, but
or stupid thoughts in their own head for the hero.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. They've convinced themselves that this can't work. So, I do think, it depends on the reader. I think a lot of things I can see why she would want to have like more power behind her reading, to be more purposeful. But at the same time, I don't look at a billionaire romance as this because he's a billionaire, it takes away from somebody else, because to me, that's different than reality. And, and we've said it before, the whole thing I love about romance is that you can safely explore these fantasies that aren't reality.
I mean, because in reality, there's probably not a good billionaire in the whole world.
No, for sure. No. And there's probably not that many either,
I don't think there is.
Yeah. So, and they got that way. They're terrible people, but whatever. But that's real life.
That's real life. I was like, I don't even want to go there. That's a whole other thing.
Yeah. That's real life shit.
And see, and that's what I think. If I wrote that would be very in depth. You know what I mean? That would be a very. It almost feels like complicated thing to write, and I'm like, I'm just doing romance here.
Yeah. I know, it's true.
I can't find the unions right now.
Yeah. So, I don't know. I mean, I can see what she's saying. Like, I can understand why she feels this way. I can absolutely get it.
Everyday life, that would sound really hot. Like in reality.
Yeah. And maybe that's what it is for her, is that she wants her romances to be more, reality driven, which is, something that could be a possibility. And not necessarily, I don't know, like a guy and a girl at, some kind of insane asylum falling in love and breaking out. Like our shit.
The doctor's like a double agent.
Yeah, I know, right? Like, maybe she doesn't want a heroine that makes teddy bears for a living.
See what it makes me laugh.
But I appreciated her email because I thought it was really it was thought provoking. So, and I'm glad we could talk about it.
There's an audience for that. Doesn't Jessica Clare have a blue collar series?
Yeah, I think so.
It's really good.
Yeah.
God, I have to go back and look. She's had so many books over the years.
Oh my God! You know what though? Nothing's gonna top those fucking cowboy books. I'm sorry. Those were like the Christmas ones. I mean, like there was literally nothing better about those. Like every Christmas, I looked forward to that more than anything else. Was like a Christmas romance from Jessica Clare.
No, she has one where the guy, like the first book is like Dirty Money or something. They were like trailer trash kids, and they win the millionaire or they win the lottery or something, or they strike oil. I can't remember.
Yeah.
But he falls in love with like a real estate. He's just buying everything, and then
anytime he doesn't like, burns it down.
Yeah, and anything he doesn't like if he didn't like you, he buys your shit and burns it down. I
forgot about that. Oh my God, I forgot about that. Yes, that one's Dirty Money. That one's good. The audio's good on that. The audio's good on that book too.
I think I'm gonna go back. I'm gonna get the audio and listen. That book was fun.
That was a fun book. That's what I like in romance too. Is I want a little bit of ridiculous.
Yeah.
Give me that ridiculous, crazy, dumb plot. Oh, I love
maybe
stupid
you could
shit.
write a billionaire who's like a humanitarian.
Oh yeah,
humanitarian.
Yes, that's what we need to write. Is the billionaire who's trying to give all his money away, and he hires like this girl to help him do it. And she's like, "Why are you giving all this money away?" And she's like trying to save it.
She comes to him. She's like, "I own this puppy farm, and we need money." And he's like, "I'll save all the puppies in the world,
all of them, if you work for me. Yeah, help me give all this money away, like Brewster's Millions.
Give tax breaks, and we'll send a check to everybody that owns a puppy."
Yeah, I love this. Let's do it. Somebody write that down, lady listeners. Write this idea down. Remind me, okay? Someone remind me to write this book with us. All right, great, perfect. All right, let's talk about Fiona Davenport. We're going to be here all night otherwise. The writing duo of Elle Christensen and Rochelle Page team up under the USA Today best-selling Fiona Davenport pen name to bring you sexy insta love stories filled with alpha males. If you want a quick and dirty read with a guaranteed happily ever after, then give Fiona Davenport a try. That's them. The book you're about to listen to is called The One I Want for Christmas. Holly Lane, that fucking name, right away. Holly Lane hadn't planned to take a trip on Santa's lap this year, but her best friend talks her into it anyway. Only it isn't a what that she's wishing for this year. It's a who. But what are the odds that Santa can fit Jacob Marley in her stocking? Warning, some of the best gifts come in small packages, which is a good thing since this sweet and sexy novella is short, but not as short as the blurb. I was like, she sent me that. I was like, you idiot. I love you.
I love it.
And I was like, I love you. This is terrible. I love it. All right. So, I ask all the authors, our new question this year is, what's a fun fact? Oh, sorry. I said, what's a fun fact? And she said, we often get asked how we started writing together as Fiona. We were friends and critique partners long before we started writing together. Back in late 2015, when we had the idea for Fiona, pregnancy was a hot topic because Elle and her hubby had been struggling with infertility for 15 years. IVF is incredibly expensive, and Rochelle mentioned to Elle that she was going to get you pregnant with the Fiona project. It's probably a big reason why there are so many pregnancies/babies in our book. and that we named one of our first series, Yeah, Baby. We finished the 9th book, which we found to be quite a coincidence because 9 months, get it, in that series at the same time that Elle finally underwent a successful round of IVF and now has a beautiful daughter.
I know, it's so sweet. They started this name to pay for her IVF stuff.
Yeah, I love
know.
it.
It always
I know.
melted my heart when the
I
first time Rochelle
know.
told me
It always
that
puts a
story.
little tickle in my throat.
Rochelle is one of the sweetest people I've ever met in my life.
Yeah.
She's just like
she's
a
so
pure
genuine.
heart.
She is just genuinely got the biggest heart, does not talk shit, does not gossip, does not like do anything malicious, like just wants to help, like is happy to talk, always remembers to reach out, like she's just such a good person. And you know, like Elle is so freaking sweet too. Like anytime I met her, she is bubbly, she's fun, like where, you know, Rochelle is like sweet and kind, like Elle is just like bouncy and happy, and it's just like they just balance each other really well. They're so cute together. So yeah, I really like the both of them. They're sweet people. So anyway, enough about them. Let's talk about us. Just kidding. All right. So I asked them what else they have like new and upcoming, on sale, anything. And she said, we've grouped the podcast ebook together with a couple more holiday stories in 'Tis the Season for Love, which could also probably use a new cover. LOL.
I know, because we don't have it yet.
Yeah, I know. So I know. I was like, bitch, you better send this shit ASAP. She was like, she's making it now. So she said, if listeners in the mood for more holiday, quick and steamy reads, we also have Unwrapping His Package, Christopher, and Snow Help Me. I'm stealing that title. That's too fucking good. God damn it. Rochelle, if you're listening to this, I'm taking that. We have a new release on October 7th called Stone. It's part of our Iron Rogue MC series. We have a new release and graphics if you like it. Yes. Okay. Sorry. That was meant for me, not y'all lady listeners. And she said, and later in October, we will have a new vampire romance releasing called The Witching Hour.
Does she have a new? I love their vampire series.
Yes. So it's called The Witching Hour. And then she said they have more than 30 audiobooks to listen to on Everland.
Yeah, they've been pumping a bunch out lately.
Yeah, they have a bunch up there. And so it says, and listeners can get a 2-month free trial with the link in the show notes. We're going to put it down below in the episode description. So if you want to try it out for 2 months for free on Everland, click the link and you can get it there. And if you want to find more from Fiona Davenport or Elle Christensen or, Rochelle Page, any of them, you can find them in their reader group called Fiona's Smutaholics on Facebook, or they have Fiona Dav on Instagram. It's author FIONAD, so author Fiona D. And that's on Instagram and TikTok, so you can find them on there, and it links to their personal pages as well too. So I think that's everything.
Let's send them in so they can listen to it.
Fucking do it. Let's go.
We'll see you guys on the other side.
Bye.
This is The One I Want for Christmas by Fiona Davenport, read for you by Avi Page. Chapter 1. Holly. I'm so glad I was able to drag you out of the house, Harley exhaled, plopping down onto a chair and slurping at her smoothie. It's been way too long since we last had H's United time. I miss you. We lifted our pinky fingers and locked them together, just like we'd been doing ever since we'd come up with the silly nickname back in kindergarten almost 13 years ago. She was so right. It had been way too long. I miss you too, I whispered. I'm sorry I've been such a recluse lately. Hey, she reached for my hand. It's not like I don't understand why. I just wish you'd let me be there for you, especially at this time of year when I know you're missing her more than ever. I sighed and laid my head on her shoulder. This was going to be my first Christmas by myself. It had always been just my mom and me, the two of us versus the world, and Christmas was our special time. After I graduated high school, my mom finally started dating. She met Lucien Kane, an awesome guy, and I'd been ecstatic for her. But Lucien was from Florida, only in Connecticut for a summer. After he proposed, She moved there to live with him. She asked me to go with her, but I couldn't bring myself to leave my home. We were planning to spend the holidays all together, but storms had been blowing through Connecticut for 4 days straight. My small town was practically barricaded by snow. Their flights had been delayed and then canceled because the airports had finally shut down yesterday morning. Thanksgiving was one thing, but Christmas, I wasn't sure how I was going to celebrate without my family. My plan had been to hole up in my house and watch movies all weekend long. I was in a degree program for business and graphic art and had a summer project I could work on, even though it was basically done. The degree was really a formality, though. I'd been working from home as a graphic artist for a year before I was done with high school. And I had a ton of work to catch up on. But then Harley had barged in, ranting and raving about how it was Christmas Eve and we hadn't done any shopping together like we did every year. Before I knew it, I was bundled up and headed to the mall with her. It was the first time in too long since I'd truly enjoyed myself. I was lucky to have a friend like her in my life. Your mom wouldn't want you moping around on her favorite holiday. I laughed. My mom really does love the holidays. Obviously, since she named you Holly, she teased, trying to lighten the mood. I followed her lead, not wanting to spoil what had been a great morning on a day I had expected to suck beyond belief. Hey, it's better than your dad loving his motorcycle so much that your parents named you Harley. Yeah, she drawled. Like I haven't heard that from you before. Only about 1,000,000 times. You know what else I've heard about 1,000,000 times? She asked, jumping up and dragging me to my feet. Ho?
Ho, ho.
The mall Santa finished off for her as we neared the North Pole display in the middle of the mall. Oh no. I tugged on my arm, trying to back away from her. Come on, it'll be fun, she insisted, refusing to let me go. We're too old to go sit on Santa's lap, I protested. Even if I wanted to, which I don't, they're not going to let us do it. Sure they will. Harley pointed towards the female elf managing the line. Kayla will make sure we get in. Crap, I muttered, recognizing one of Harley's friends from high school. They'd been on the cheerleading squad together for years, which meant Harley was right. It didn't matter that we were a good 10 years older than the biggest kid in line. They weren't going to turn us away. With the sympathetic gleam in Kayla's eyes as she looked from Harley to me, there would be no way for me to get out of this gracefully. Forcing a smile onto my face, I made small talk until it was our turn. Harley went first, eliciting a giggle from me when she started to sing Santa Baby as she settled herself on Santa's lap. By the time she hopped off, there was a blush staining his cheeks, and I was giggling so hard I almost couldn't make my way up to where he was sitting. It's your turn now. No excuses. Kayla nudged me forwards. All right, I'm going, I huffed. Sorry about this, I mumbled.
No apologies needed. Your friend there was the most entertaining visitor I've had all season.
I'm sure she was. She's quite the handful.
You can say that again, he agreed, his eyes darting over to where she stood for a moment.
I peered more closely at his face and realized the mall Santa wasn't quite as old as I'd originally thought. And he definitely wasn't as soft and round as the padding made him seem, if the bunched muscles of his thigh were any indication. I had a feeling there was a hot guy under that suit, one who was interested in my best friend. Interesting. Maybe our little visit to Santa was more about her than me.
What are you wishing for this Christmas?
Santa's question drew me out of my thoughts about him and Harley. My mind blanked for a moment. I couldn't think of a single thing I wanted this year. Well, except for one thing. My Christmas wish isn't a what, it's a who, I whispered.
Me too,
he admitted softly, right before Harley helped me off his lap and wrapped her arms around me. Oh, Holly, I'm so sorry for pushing you into this. Of course your Christmas wish is to be with your mom. Maybe it should have been, but it wasn't. The person I found myself wishing for was quite a surprise. It was someone else's face that instantly came to mind. A boy I'd tried not to think too much about over the past few years. The only boy I'd ever dated, back in my freshman year of high school. My face, along with my whole body, heated at my thoughts of him. Unfortunately, Harley's eagle eyes didn't miss a thing. "What's up with the blush?" she asked, tugging me away from the North Pole display. "Nothing." I thought I was going to get lucky and that she was going to let me get away with it. Of course, I was wrong. "Spill it, Holly. Why were you blushing like that?" "Because for some stupid reason, the first thing that popped into my head when your Santa boyfriend asked me what I wanted for Christmas was Jacob." "Jacob Marley?" she gasped. "What other Jacob would it be?" I grumbled. "But you haven't mentioned him in, what, 3 years?" 3 years, 3 months, and 2 days. "Holy crap," she breathed. Yeah, it was kind of shocking to realize I'd mentally kept track of the days all this time. Harley had been the one I'd spilled my heart out to when Jacob's family had moved all the way across the country to Oregon at the end of my freshman and his junior year. We'd only been dating for a few months, but my young heart had been sure he was the one for me. Like most high school sweethearts who were separated, it didn't withstand the distance and we lost touch. Young love was real, but it still didn't bind the way a mature heart would. I'd never gotten over him, though. Never dated another boy. Never so much as kissed anyone else in all the years since. With my mom so far away, it seemed like all I had was time lately. Lots and lots of free time on my hands. And apparently that extra time had led to thoughts about Jacob Marley, the one who'd gotten away, and the one I wanted for Christmas. If only holiday wishes really did come true. But they didn't. If they did, I wouldn't be headed home to an empty house on Christmas Eve. My mom would be there, Jacob would never have moved, and we'd have been together the last 3 holidays. "It doesn't feel right, dropping you off like this," Harley grumbled as she pulled into my driveway. "My mom and dad have asked me 1,000,000 times why you aren't spending the night with us tonight." I looked up at the house I'd spent my entire childhood in. There were so many happy memories we'd made in it. My mom was disappointed when I didn't move with her. She and Lucien were worried about leaving me on my own. Lucien surprised us both by paying off my childhood home and giving it to me as a gift. He made sure I could live in it for however long I'd like because it was mine, free and clear. It was the one place in the world where I felt like I belonged, where the sadness of missing my mom didn't seem quite so bad since I was surrounded by her and such wonderful memories there. Tell them thank you, but I feel like I need to be here tonight. I'm going to read a steamy holiday romance and maybe get a little tipsy on some eggnog. Well, maybe not tipsy, since my mom isn't here to add the liquor. Okay. Her lips twitched, but she heaved a huge sigh, making it clear she wished my answer was different. But if you change your mind, you know where to find me. You're going to call and check up on me as soon as you get home, aren't you? Of course I am. Just remember, I warned as I stepped out of her car and leaned inside to wag a finger at her. The more often you call, the more chances I'll get to ask you about Santa. Shit. She narrowed her eyes at me. There isn't much to tell. I tilted my head and raised my eyebrows at her. Uh-huh. And Peter Pan was one of Santa's elves. Fine. Every time you ask me about him, I'll just have to ask you about Jacob. And harass you about why you're such a chicken and haven't tried to look him up, she said, and one-upped me on the threats. You're impossible, I grumbled, mostly irritated because she was right. I was a chicken. I'd thought of looking him up since I graduated, but the thought of finding out that he wasn't single kept me from going through with it. Chapter 2. Holly. Setting a plate of cookies on the little table by the fireplace, a wave of loneliness swept over me. It was a Christmas Eve tradition I'd shared with my mom from before I could even remember. With her gone, it was a little bittersweet. In one of the many photo albums she'd made of my childhood, there was a picture of me as a soon-to-be 1-year-old reaching out in an attempt to grab one of the frosted, cut-out cookies. Then when I was almost 2, she'd snapped a shot of me sprinkling colored sugar onto a cookie that was almost as big as my head and shaped like the man I was decorating it for. Santa deserved the best of the best, after all. Or at least that's what I'd thought all those years we'd put cookies out for him. Not so much this year, though, after putting Jacob on my mind. I grumbled to myself as I yanked one of the cookies off the plate and shoved it in my mouth. The big guy in the red suit messed with my head, so it only seemed fair to steal one of his cookies. And a little bit of his milk, too. I gulped it down and smiled to myself, thinking about how I'd caught my mom doing the same thing when I was 9, only she grimaced because she hated milk. But she drank it anyway. When I'd asked her about it a few years later, she'd explained that someone had to drink it. I'd suggested that pouring it down the sink would have worked just as well, but she wouldn't hear of it. She'd insisted I would have been able to tell by the lack of lip marks on the cup that nobody had drunk from it. Looking down at the rim of the cup in my hands, I saw a half-moon of milk left behind by my lips and laughed to myself. She was right. I probably would have noticed if she had just poured it down the sink. Then again, she usually was, even when it came to Jacob and me. She'd warned me that young love was fragile, and as much as it seemed we were meant to be together at the time, our futures were far from certain, especially with our age difference. I was older for my grade, about to turn 16, but Jacob would be a senior, and then while I still had 2 years of high school, he would be going off to college. Life happened, and I thought I had found a way to move on. Only, my Christmas Eve was filled with thoughts of Jacob, making me realize I wasn't as over him as I believed. I guess it wasn't any surprise that when I finally went to bed, I was bombarded by dreams of him all night long. When he'd first left, I'd dreamed of him each and every night, reliving all the moments we'd shared together when I slept. Eventually, the dreams came further and further apart until I barely had them at all. But I made up for it on Christmas Eve, as they came fast and furious. The first one was more a memory than a dream. It was well worth remembering. The first time Jacob hit second base with me. We were sitting on the couch in my living room, watching a movie while my mom had run out to the grocery store. A scary one. I hated them, but Jacob loved them. Or at least, he loved how I reacted when I was startled. I literally crawled onto his lap, freaked out, even though I knew it was all pretend. I can't believe I agreed to watch this. My evil plan worked, he rasped in my ear. I've got you right where I want you, Hollyberry. I giggled at the nickname. Oh, you do? He took advantage of my mouth being open and sealed his lips over mine, shutting me up with a deep kiss. His tongue licked into my mouth, slowly tangling with mine. My hands went to his hair and slid through it, tugging when he wrapped his arms around me and moved me until he had me on my back on the couch. His mouth swallowed my surprised gasp as his hand slid under my shirt, all the way up until he was cupping my breast over my lace bra. I moaned, Jacob. You feel even better than I imagined. Soft here. He kneaded it with gentle squeezes. But not here. His fingers slipped under the lace and went straight for my pebbled nipple, rolling and tugging it. I lay there, squirming beneath him as he lifted my shirt higher and then lowered his head down to my chest, his heated blue eyes scanning my face to make sure I was okay with what he was doing. Please, I whispered, not even sure what I was asking for, but somehow knowing he needed the reassurance that I was right there with him the whole way. His mouth surrounded my nipple, making my back arch upwards when I felt the wet heat against my skin. Oh no, I moaned, my gaze darting frantically to the door at the sound of my mom's car in the driveway. In a flash, Jacob had my bra back in place, my shirt shoved down, and me cuddled up next to him like nothing earth-shattering had just happened. Only it had, and I'd never forgotten. As the night progressed, so did my dreams, each one racier than the last. More memories intermingled with fantasies. Some parts so familiar because of how many times I'd pictured them in my mind over the years. But they felt new, exciting, and oh so real. Let me make you come, Holly. I've been thinking about it for days, weeks, months even. When his hand pushed between my legs, they fell open and made room for him. My body was so aroused, I didn't have it in me to feel an ounce of shame or self-consciousness.
You're so wet for me.
His gaze slid down my body to where his fingers drifted against me.
Soft, he groaned. And pink.
It was strangely arousing, knowing he was looking at me down there while I was watching his every reaction. Then he slid one finger carefully into me, and my eyes fluttered shut.
So damn tight.
He pulled his finger out and thrust it gently back into me as far as it would go. My back arched as I clenched around him.
Because you've never let anyone else slide their finger into you like this, have you?
I shook my head, swallowing hard.
That's right, Holly. This pussy is mine, just like every inch of you is all mine. Nobody else gets to touch you. Only me.
He pulled out and pushed back into me with 2 fingers this time, making me moan in need.
Nobody else gets to see you like this, to hear the sounds you make when you come. Only me.
Only you, I breathed out, my hips circling shamelessly onto his thrusting fingers. I'd never felt like this before in my life. Having him touch me was infinitely better than what I'd done on my own while thinking about him in bed late at night.
Damn straight, he growled.
He twisted his wrist, changing the thrust of his fingers, and my eyes popped open. I found him staring down at me, his face flushed with lust. For me. I'd done that to him, just by responding to his touch. Please, Jacob, I didn't really know what I needed. I felt like I was hanging over a ledge, my body drawn tight and my walls rippling around his stroking fingers.
What do you need, baby? Whatever it is, I'll give it to you.
More, I panted.
Then more is what you'll get.
The pad of his thumb rubbed my clitoris in gentle circles. Everything tightened in my core, the tension building as he massaged my clit and pushed his fingers in and out in a steady, unhurried rhythm. So close, I whimpered.
Give it to me, Holly. Let me see you fly apart for me.
My climax hit me as my hips pumped onto his hand. Any hint of shyness had long since flown out the window. My gaze was locked on his blue eyes, fascinated by the masculine triumph that flared in them. Then his gaze switched from my face to the spot between my legs where his fingers still played. I didn't have enough time to register the wicked gleam in his eyes before his head dropped low and he thrust his tongue inside me as I convulsed against him. "Oh, my God!" I cried out, my fingers tangling in his hair. My pussy fluttered and clenched, trying to pull his tongue deeper. He groaned against me, and the vibrations made my climax go on and on. He didn't let up, spurred on by my moans and whimpers. He lapped and nibbled at my throbbing clit until I quickened again, 2 fingers pushing inside me, thrusting, stroking, making me sensitive. It was all I could do to not thrash against the invasion. "No more!" I cried out, my head tossing from side to side. "I can't take it!"
You can, he insisted, and you will because you need to so I can fit inside your tight pussy.
I nodded my head weakly, knowing he was right and wanting to feel him inside me like that so much.
That's my girl,
he breathed against my wet skin. His fingers twisted and turned, opening me for him. He hit a particularly sensitive spot, and my hips raised up as another orgasm pulsed through my body, just as devastating as the one before it. He lifted up, his hands urgent as he yanked me down to the center of the bed. I was pinned underneath him, his forearms on either side of me. His eyes were so dark they looked almost midnight blue. His cheeks were flushed red, and his chin was wet. From me. From the second orgasm he'd thrust upon me to make sure I was ready for this. For him. And I was. Beyond ready. "Jacob, please, take me. I need you."
Holly, He rasped out my name as he lined his hard length up with my opening and... "No," I whimpered, dragged from my dream just as I was getting to the good part. There was a pounding noise at the door, and it must have been what had woken me up. A quick glance at the front window showed the sun was starting to rise and snow was steadily falling. I groaned when my eyes darted to the clock on the wall. Even the prospect of a white Christmas wouldn't save Harley from my wrath at 8 o'clock in the morning. "I'm going to kill her," I grumbled, marching to the door. There was only one person I knew who would have the nerve to pull me from my bed, well, my couch, really, since I'd stumbled downstairs in the middle of the night to crash there since I wasn't having a restful night. And being my best friend wasn't going to save her from waking me up right when I was finally going to dream about what it felt like to have Jacob sink deep inside me. Even after hundreds of dreams about him, I'd never managed to reach that point, and I was pissed to have it stolen away from me. Being a virgin in both real life and my dream life sucked. Flinging the door open, I opened my mouth to start my tirade at Harley, but it wasn't her I found standing there, and a startled yelp slipped from my lips instead. It was the only sound I was capable of making since I was stunned silent. Wondering if I was still dreaming, I pinched myself. The sting of pain was welcome, because it meant this wasn't a dream. It was Christmas morning, and Jacob Marley was standing on my doorstep. He was several inches taller than the last time I'd seen him, at least 6 feet tall now. His body was still all lean, sinewy muscles. His blonde hair was a shade or two darker, his eyes the exact same bright blue I recalled. He smiled, and sexy dimples dug deep into his cheeks. He was my Jacob, only better. Maybe holiday wishes really did come true after all. Chapter 3. Jacob. Holly Lane. The girl of my dreams, both literally and figuratively. I was finally standing in front of her after the longest 3 years, 3 months, and 3 days of my life. When my dad got a new job and we moved to Oregon, it tore me up to leave Holly. But I'd only had a year left of high school, so I figured I would move back to Connecticut after graduation. My senior year was hectic with academics and sports. So much so that we didn't have much time to reconnect, and by the end of the year, we had drifted completely apart. The irony was, I had kept busy so I couldn't dwell too much on missing her. I was offered a scholarship to Princeton, and one of my first thoughts was the very close proximity to Holly. The thing was, while I was starting my freshman year of college, Holly still had 2 years of high school left. Even as close as I would be, it would be far enough that dating me would eat up her time. I knew she would put me first, and that meant missing out on all the activities and time with friends that make high school fun. On top of that, I was entering into an intense program that would allow me to graduate within 3 years instead of 4. I'd taken credits my senior year that had given me the opportunity to test out of some of my gen eds, but it was still going to be grueling work to get all of my coursework done in the time frame I wanted. What kind of relationship would we have if I had no time for her? I risked hurting her and pushing her away, permanently damaging us. In the end, I decided that we both needed to focus on our own paths for a time. If either or both of us moved on, then we weren't meant to be. Though I didn't see that happening in my future. No woman had ever been worth a second glance since the moment I first laid eyes on Holly. I'd decided that when she graduated, if we were both still single, I'd take it as a sign and finally claim her as mine permanently. I studied hard to finish my degree early, and it kept my mind occupied. For the most part. I still dreamt of her often, reliving the short time we had together. Dating anyone else never even crossed my mind. Holly was my first girlfriend, my first kiss, my first everything, and every day it became more clear that she would also be my last. Finally, 2 years were up and I'd been completely convinced that there would never be anyone but Holly for me, and vice versa. There were a lot of things to set in place before I could go to her. First and foremost, I'd called Janet, her mom, and asked for her help, as well as her permission to marry Holly. To my surprise, she'd shrieked in delight and gushed over how happy it made her that we would be together. Apparently, she had hoped for all those years that we would reconnect because she had seen something special between us. We'd even cooked up excuses for her to cancel coming to visit Holly for Christmas so that I could be alone with her. The weather had been a stroke of luck. I'd paced my hotel room for most of the night, anxious for Christmas morning to arrive. When the clock read 7:30 in the morning, I couldn't wait any longer. I'd loaded my car, making sure the special items I'd brought were easily accessible, then drove to the woman who held my heart in her hands. Fat, white snowflakes had been drifting down, forcing me to drive slower, particularly since the plows hadn't been by yet. Holly would be loving it, though, and that thought alone brought a smile to my face and an appreciation for the scenery, rather than being frustrated at the crawling pace I'd had to keep. At last, I'd pulled into the driveway of a cute white bungalow house. It was decked out in garlands and lights, the lawn sporting a life-size, jolly Santa in his sleigh and all of his reindeer. I couldn't help chuckling. Holly always lamented at how much her mother loved Christmas, but the truth was, Holly adored the holiday too. I'd zipped up my coat and wound a scarf around my neck before opening my door. Crystals of snow dusted my hair and shoulders in seconds, and I jogged around to the trunk knowing I'd be soaking wet in minutes if I didn't hurry. Shifting things around, I'd finally spied the gold rope of the bag I was looking for. I'd pulled out the swath of red velvet and checked to make sure it wasn't missing anything. After closing the trunk, I'd rushed carefully up the path to the front door, which thankfully had an awning. For a couple of minutes, I had simply stood there and took deep breaths to calm my racing heart. Anticipation got the best of me, and I'd knocked firmly on the door. Now, I was staring at a vision, even more perfect than any of my dreams or memories. Holly was adorably mussed, clearly having just woken up. Her shoulder-length, chocolatey brown hair was a little wild, and when she'd opened the door, her matching brown eyes were heavy-lidded but spitting fire. Then she'd seen me, and they'd widened with shock as her plump pink lips opened from her jaw dropping. That mouth had been the star of many, many fantasies. I shifted the bag in front of me strategically. My eyes swept hungrily over all of her. It was obvious that she'd been asleep and forgotten that she was only wearing an overly large t-shirt that said, "Santa, don't judge me, bro," and knee socks covered in tiny reindeer. She hadn't gotten any taller than the 5'2" she'd been the last time I saw her. But her curves had filled out, and my hands suddenly ached to be filled with them, causing me to tighten my grip on the ropes of my bag. She was so fucking gorgeous. "Hello, Hollyberry," I greeted softly. I reached out and gently closed her mouth with a finger under her chin.
"How? But what are you? I can't believe—"
she stuttered. A smile stretched across my face at how damn cute she was. "I'm here to deliver your Christmas presents," I drawled with a wink. "Just think of me as your own personal Santa Claus." She still stood there, unmoving and staring at me. I laughed. "I'm not a specter, baby. I'm real. Are you going to let me in?" Her head bobbed, and she stepped back to hold the door open for me to pass through. Spying the half-eaten plate of cookies on the mantel and the empty glass of milk, I laughed again. Holly had told me stories about that tradition. It was one I intended for us to continue with our children. I hadn't laughed or felt that happy in a long time, and I was practically vibrating with energy. The front door clicked shut, and I turned towards it. Holly watched me, a slightly sheepish look crossing her face when she glanced at the plate. "You're never too old to put out cookies for Santa," I smirked. She laughed and shrugged. Looking at her, so beautiful and bright, I was filled with renewed determination. Holly was mine. I wasn't going to budge on that fact, but I was hoping she would choose us on her own. I held out my hand and waited. After only a moment's hesitation, she laid her warm palm on mine, and my fingers immediately closed around her hand. Holding it firmly, I led her to the couch and sat before taking a hold of her luscious hips and guiding her down to sit on my lap.
"How are you here?"
she breathed, finally speaking a full sentence. I feel like you aren't real. I wished for you, and... She trailed off, and her cheeks dusted with pink. I pointed at myself with my thumb. Santa, remember? She giggled and batted at my hand playfully. Seriously, Jacob? You don't believe me? I asked with mock offense. I don't, she sniffed haughtily. What evidence do you need besides your senses? She frowned prettily. I don't know. Why do you doubt your senses? Because little things affect them. You invade my dreams at the simplest sight or smell. So, tell me, how do I know I'm not dreaming? She blushed even harder, and I could tell she had a solution in mind, but was too shy to say it. If her dreams had been anything like mine, I would bet I was thinking of the same thing, and it made me hard as a fucking rock. It was impossible to hide from her, given her lack of clothing and the fact that she was sitting on my lap. Her blush turned to a full flush, and she squirmed, her eyes becoming impossibly dark as they filled with desire. I groaned and let my head fall back on the couch, then took deep breaths to try and regain some control. Later, we would most definitely be getting to that later. Patience, Jacob. Lifting my head back up, I stilled her with my hands on her hips. Let's just go with it for now, but I promise to prove it to you soon. She cocked her head to the side and studied me curiously, then shrugged. Okay. She started to move off my lap, and I tightened my grip, my fingers digging into her flesh. I like you right where you are, Holly Berry, I growled. She raised an eyebrow, but didn't continue her attempts to move. I kissed the tip of her nose, wishing it was her mouth. I knew if my lips were on hers, I wouldn't be able to stop. I dropped the bag on the ground at my feet and leaned around Holly to fetch it and put it next to us. Pulling out the first brightly wrapped package, I placed it in front of her. I was a little nervous about this gift. It truly bared me to her and made me vulnerable. Holly's eyes twinkled as she tore at the ribbon and wrapping paper. Underneath was a brown, leather-bound journal. A journal? She asked, giving me an odd look. Look inside, I encouraged. She untied the twine that held it closed, opened it, and gasped. The inscription on the first page said, Memories of Holly Lane. In my heart, always. Jacob Marley. I don't understand, she admitted quietly. Rubbing slow circles over her back, I explained. Over the years, any time something made me think of you, or I found myself wanting to tell you something, I wrote it down. It started with this journal. The chocolate brown leather reminded me so much of your eyes. I bought it and wrote down that thought on the first page. She flipped through to the end and glanced up at me in surprise. It's full? I nodded. I thought of you a lot. I have 2 more completely filled as well. Her eyes misted and she looked away, blinking rapidly. With a little sniff, she turned back to me, confusion written on her face. If you wanted me so much, why did you stay away? Chapter 4. Jacob. Her voice was small as she asked the question, and it squeezed my heart painfully. There were things we both needed to do, Holly Berry, I hurried to explain. And I think deep down you know that. She didn't confirm or deny it, only gave me a thoughtful expression and gestured for me to continue. I busted my ass for the last 3 years and 3 months, putting everything I had into school, and I grinned victoriously. This felt so good to say. I finished my courses a couple of weeks ago. I have to do an internship and won't officially graduate until the spring, but for the most part, I'm done. Holly's face lit up and she smiled brightly, pulling me into a tight hug. Holy crap, Jacob. That's amazing. Congratulations. I'm so proud of you. Thanks, baby. I wanted to wait to be with you until I could truly be with you. It was motivation enough to get done as fast as possible. She was practically glowing when she let me go and sat straight. Hope was written all over her face when she asked,
What does that mean for us? You do want there to be an us, right? I cupped her face in my hands and steeled myself against the onslaught of desire I was about to slam into. Placing a soft kiss on her lips, I held fast to my control. Even as my cock swelled so big I was a little worried it would burst. I mentally high-fived myself when I managed to pull back without deepening the kiss. How about I answer that with your next present? I get more presents? She asked excitedly. It was unbelievably cute, and my heart filled with love for her, warming me all over. Some of the heat may also have been due to the fire raging in my belly. Fishing out a specific gift, I handed her a small box with a glittery silver bow. She lifted the lid and peered inside before lifting the item out. A glass heart dangled on a string from her fingertips. The words, "Our First Christmas," and the date were etched in the center. Holly seemed to turn boneless, and she melted into me, resting against my chest with a contented sigh. I love it, she whispered. My arms closed around her, and I kissed the top of her head. I love you, I answered without thinking. She stiffened in my embrace. Even her chest stopped its rhythmic rise from breathing. Then she exhaled slowly. You love me? Of course I do, baby, I murmured. She went boneless again. After a minute of silence, I demanded, Now, tell me you love me too. What makes you so sure? I pushed her away, just enough that I could cut her words off with my mouth crushing down on hers. Without breaking the kiss, I took everything from her hands and put it on the table next to us. I put my bag on the ground again, and then deftly maneuvered us so that Holly was trapped below me on the couch. I wanted her so fucking bad. My cock was pulsing hard, making me a little dizzy. My tongue plunged into her mouth and we tangled together, tasting and teasing. Fuck, I groaned when we finally broke apart to breathe. You feel 1,000,000 times more amazing than I remember. One hand slid underneath her shirt, over her rib cage, and up to cup one of her full tits. The other hand went around her to palm an ass cheek. Soft here, I murmured, giving both a squeeze. She moaned and writhed restlessly. The fingers on the hand on her breast closed around her peaked nipple, and the others slipped into her panties and went straight to her clit. I pinched both and growled. But not here. Jacob! Holly cried out, her back arching and her hips bucking. I almost came right then from her reaction and the feel of her center pressing into mine. My fingers started to circle both buds, staying just far enough away to torture her a little. So wet. I remember how my fingers used to slide through this pussy. All the while I wondered if you were slick enough to take my cock. She whimpered and squirmed, trying to shift so that I would touch her in the right places and give her relief. I tisked and drew bigger circles. No, she moaned. I need you. I passed the pads of my fingers over the tips lightly, the sound of her cry causing my dick to start leaking cum furiously. Tell me you love me and I'll give you what you want, baby. I love you, Jacob. I groaned as the words washed over me, my cock no longer able to withstand anything, exploding in my pants. I kissed her deeply as I pressed on her nipple and clit, then pinched them, setting off a small orgasm. It would be enough to give her some relief, but still leave her wanting. Fuck, I grimaced. I can't believe I came in my pants. If I can't control it now, how the fuck will I have enough stamina the first time my cock is gloved in your tight little pussy? It's not like I have anything to compare it to. Holly's eyes flew to mine and a smile began to grow. You don't? You waited for me? I rolled my eyes and pulled my hand from her panties. Of course I did, Holly Berry. I wouldn't let another woman touch what was yours. Lifting my fingers to my mouth, I hesitated and looked back down at her sternly. I won't love you any less, but I really fucking hope your cherry is still mine.
She nodded, and I sighed happily before licking my fingers clean. You taste amazing. I need to have my mouth on you. I dipped my fingers inside her again before bringing them back to my mouth and sucking her arousal off of them. But before I put my face or cock in her pussy, there was something I wanted. I got up onto my knees and straddled her, then whipped her shirt over her head before she knew what was happening. So fucking sexy, I said raggedly. Her generous tits were round and mouth-watering, topped with dark pink nipples. I'd seen her tits before, but those belonged to a teenager. These belonged to a woman. Her arms moved to cover her chest, and I caught them swiftly, holding them apart. "Don't hide from me, Holly Berry," I purred. "I don't see a single inch of you that isn't perfection." Her arms went limp, and I let them fall to her sides. Her cheeks were a sweet shade of pink, but she didn't try to cover up again. I reached down to retrieve the last 2 gifts from the bag and then sat back on my heels. I set one on her chest, in the valley between her tits, and grinned. "Makes me want to wrap you up like a present, just so I can open it."
"Something to look forward to later?" she asked cheekily.
"Fuck yes." I tweaked her nipple and she laughed, smacking my hand away. She started to grab the box on her chest, but I took her hand. "Not yet. This one first." I took the small box and scooted back, helping her sit up because this gift was a little bigger and weighed more. She took the package and set it in her lap before opening it. Inside was a porcelain plate that said Santa's cookies, a milk jug that said Santa's milk, and a small bowl that said reindeer treats. Holly's dark eyes sparkled as she smiled at me.
"It's so charming."
I kissed the tip of her nose and told her, "I know the cookies and milk are a big tradition for you, and I want to continue it with our own children."
"Our children?"
I gestured to the plate. "I guess that depends on your answer." Confused, Holly frowned and looked back down at the plate. Her eyebrows lifted and she gasped, her hand covering her mouth. The center of the plate was a chalkboard for kids to write a message to Santa. It currently said, "Will you marry me?" I put the remaining box on the plate. She glanced up at me with tears in her eyes and then ripped open the gift. Inside was a platinum band, adorned with a 2-carat round diamond, and on either side it was flanked by a cluster of 3 tiny round rubies and an emerald shaped like a leaf. It was cheesy, but I didn't care. When I thought about my ring on her finger, it was all I could see.
"Jacob," she sniffled, "I love it."
Her eyes lifted to mine, and they were filled with happiness, soothing the worry that had popped up with her tears. "So?" I asked eagerly. She jumped to her feet and set the dishes aside, then climbed back on the couch and straddled me. Her arms encircled my neck, and she squeezed me to her.
"Yes," she yelled, "I'm going to marry Jacob Marley."
I laughed and hugged her close, then set her back so I could slip the ring onto her finger. "This," I whispered, tenderly kissing my ring on her finger. "This is what I was waiting for." Holding her firmly, I stood and walked with her to the back of the house. She directed me to her old room, which she had thankfully updated with a queen-size bed instead of her old twin. I laid her down on the mattress, and then drew her panties down her legs so she was completely naked. "I wanted to wait to make love to you until you were wearing my ring." I shed my clothes and leaned over to cage her between my arms. "Now you're going to be mine in every way, Holly. I'm going to pop your sweet little cherry and make you come so hard you see stars." I began to kiss my way down her body and mumbled, "First, I need to make sure you're ready for me." I placed a kiss over her pubic bone and then stood and walked around to the end of the bed. Grabbing her ankles, I dragged her to me until her ass was almost hanging off, then knelt between them and put a leg on each of my shoulders. "Damn, you smell good," I groaned, practically burying my nose in her smoothly waxed pussy. "So pink and wet. You want my tongue inside you, baby? Will you give me more cream to lick and taste?" Talking dirty had always made Holly squirm, and it was definitely turning her on. Just from talking, she was gushing out sweet liquid, and I enthusiastically lapped it up. It fueled my lust, too, and I was dripping with my need. I reached down to squeeze the base of my dick, trying to relieve some of the building pressure. I put my hands under her ass and lifted her pussy to my face, putting it at the right angle so I could take the whole thing in my mouth and suck. Then I swirled my tongue around before plunging it inside her. Jacob, yes, she cried out, her hips starting to buck rhythmically, chasing her orgasm. I fed on her sex, eating her like a starving man until she screamed my name and her body convulsed. I gentled my ministrations until she calmed, but didn't give her time to rest before pushing a single digit inside her. Ugh, you're so tight, I growled. Shit, I was going to need to work her, make sure she stretched to fit my considerable girth. I latched onto her clit again and started plunging my finger in and out. No, Jacob, she whined. I can't. Oh my gosh. You have to, baby, to make sure you can take my cock. I inserted a second finger and glided a hand up her body to play with one of her nipples. Her cries escalated and I added a third. She was still gripping my fingers like a fucking vice, but I was pretty sure that if she came again, she'd be ready for me. I pushed her higher and she began to chant, Yes! Jacob! It was hot as fuck, and my dick was big and hard, the skin stretched tight and the head purple and leaking thick, creamy liquid. I needed to get in her soon. I curled my fingers to rub the sensitive spot inside her and bit on her clit. She flew apart, and as she was lost to her orgasm, I shifted her back to the center of the bed and came down over the top of her. I guided the head of my cock to her entrance and pushed in just a little. Her walls clamped down, and I took several deep breaths in an effort to keep from blowing my load that very second. Holly's arms gripped my shoulders, her nails digging into the skin, and her legs closed around my hips. You're so big, stretching me. I paused. Am I hurting you? She shook her head frantically. It feels good, like I'm full. I love the idea of being full of you. That is so fucking hot, Holly. You're going to make me come before I'm ready, I growled. I pushed in until I felt the barrier between me and heaven. I love that you never let anyone near this pussy but me. Are you ready for me to take your sweet cherry, baby? Yes. Her hips pressed up, snapping my restraint, and I plunged in fast and hard. She cried out, and I stilled, every part of me rejecting the idea that I hurt her. Except maybe my cock. He didn't really give a fuck. Are you okay? She panted for a few moments, then shifted experimentally before nodding. Yeah, the pain is almost gone. I think I want you to move. Whatever you want, baby. That's what you'll get. I pulled out and sunk back in with a ragged moan. You're so fucking hot. So tight. I looked down as I pulled out again and growled in satisfaction at our mixed arousal tinged with pink. Seeing you all over me, with the evidence that I'm the one who took your cherry. I own you. Right, baby? Yes, she cried out. I'm yours. That's right, Holly. This pussy is mine. Just like every inch of you is all mine. Nobody else gets to touch you. Only me. Holly froze and her head lifted, her brown eyes staring at me wildly. What did you say? I frowned. You better not be rethinking your decision, Holly. I punctuated my point with a deep, hard thrust. No, she moaned, her head dropping back. I dreamt. Never mind. Just fuck me harder, Jacob. Well, shit. Hearing my girl get filthy blew my mind to smithereens, and there seemed to be no room for anything besides getting my girl off and burying myself so deep we couldn't possibly be anything other than one. Together, we approached the cliff and went soaring off. I roared her name as I slammed into her one last time and let go of everything. My cock pulsed with each spurt of cum filling her, marking her as mine forever. "I love you," Holly whispered. "I love you too, Holly Berry," I panted with a lingering kiss on her lips. "Without you, I would be doomed to wander the world alone."
Epilogue. Holly. "Come on, hurry up." I nudged Jacob in the back, too excited to move slowly. I'd been looking forward to this moment ever since I'd seen those 2 pink lines on a little white stick. On Christmas morning, exactly 1 year after I'd found Jacob standing on my front porch. 1 week before our first wedding anniversary. My mom had surprised us with a New Year's Day ceremony, something she'd set into motion the same day Jacob had called to ask for her permission to propose to me. She'd been so excited that she'd called his parents and convinced them to come down for New Year's Eve. We'd all gone out for a fancy dinner, celebrating the countdown and our engagement at the same time. When we woke up the next morning, and my mom sat us down at the kitchen table and said she'd needed to talk to us about something important, I'd blushed clear to my roots and squeezed Jacob's hand tightly, thinking we hadn't been as quiet the night before as I'd thought. With a teasing glint in her eye, my mom had told us that she wanted us to start our new year out the right way, as man and wife, especially if we were sleeping together already. So yeah, we definitely hadn't been as quiet as I'd hoped. But really, who could blame us? We had a lot of time to make up for. As Jacob, 4-month-old baby Joy, and I approached the North Pole display in the middle of the mall, I couldn't help but think back to the impossible feat my mom had somehow managed to pull off. Our wedding ceremony, right here in this very same spot. Jacob and I had exchanged our vows with the winter wonderland surrounding us. Him in his tuxedo with a deep red bow tie, and me in a flowing white dress, holding a bouquet accented with seasonal flourishes like cedar boughs and brunia berries. It had been better than I'd ever hoped and dreamed, just like every moment with Jacob was. Except maybe this one, but only because it was taking us too long to reach Santa.
"Patience, baby," Jacob rasped in my ear before parking the stroller off to the side and lifting Joy out of it.
"You know I don't have any."
"I promise to reward you for it later."
Standing there with our beautiful baby girl in the crook of his arm and his heated blue eyes smiling down at me, he looked sexier than ever. He was an amazing husband and a great daddy to Joy. He loved to spoil his girls, as he loved to call us. Hence this trip to the mall on the first day Santa was open for pictures. "It's a deal," I breathed out, lifting up on my toes to give him a quick kiss. Then I fussed with Joy's Santa tutu, tunic, and leggings, twisting them back into place since she'd been squirming around in the stroller during our walk through the mall. Once her outfit was put to rights, I ran my hand lightly over her wisps of blonde hair and leaned over to kiss her chubby cheeks because I just couldn't resist them for long. When I lifted my head again, her bright blue eyes were locked on my face as she giggled. My heart soared at hearing the best sound in the whole wide world.
"I'm surprised you didn't put her in the dress your mom sent."
I knew exactly which dress he was talking about. It was made from red sparkle velvet and had white fake fur trim at the hem and sleeves, along with a white bow at the waist. It was very Santa-inspired and would be perfect for a picture with the big guy. That's for next time.
"Next time?"
He looked down at me oddly.
"But she won't fit in it for more than another month or so."
"Exactly," I chirped. "Just think of how many more times I'll be able to bring her to see Santa between now and then."
"I should have known,"
he fake grumbled, the laughter in his eyes giving away how little he minded several trips to the mall to satisfy my need for pictures of Joy. Before long, he was placing her on Santa's lap. As we hovered to the side, I tugged him lower to whisper in his ear. 2 years ago, my wish to Santa for you came true. 1 year ago, our wish for a baby brought us joy. I pulled his hand down and placed it over my belly. This year, I think I'm going to wish for no morning sickness, since I already took a test this morning and it was positive. Jacob.
"Merry Christmas, Hollyberry," I whispered, nuzzling my wife's nose with my own.
Merry Christmas,
she returned as she stretched and sighed.
Go back to sleep. The kids will be up. Mommy! Daddy! Santa came!
3 sets of small feet thundered through the house and burst through our bedroom door.
It's Christmas!
Yelled Joy.
Wake up! Santa came!
Shouted Nicholas.
Presents! Santa!
Squealed Ivy as they all piled up onto our bed. Holly dissolved into giggles, and we peppered each of them with kisses and hugs. I laughed at their excitement, but we weren't a complete family yet. I hopped out of bed and swiftly walked to the room next door. December was awake, sitting in her crib and waiting patiently. She was our little thinker, always calm and observing everything around her. Her big blue eyes stared up at me, sparkling with delight. I lifted her into my arms and she clapped her hands on my cheeks.
Dad!
Merry Christmas, baby girl. I started walking back to the master bedroom and raised her up to blow a raspberry on her little tummy. Her giggles drew everyone's attention as we returned, and they shouted greetings to their little sister. Holly held out her arms and I placed December in them, where she received morning kisses from her mommy. All the kids snuggled up next to Holly, and I stood there in awe. This was my family. How had I gotten so damn lucky? Every year when Christmas came around, it reminded me of all the miracles in my life. Later, Holly and I sat on the couch laughing and watching the children open their presents. Christmas carols tinkled in the background and the lights twinkled on the tree.
No!
December yelled excitedly from her perch on the floor. I looked around to see what was upsetting her, but she started crawling towards the large picture window in the room.
No! No!
She pointed outside. Holly laughed and got to her feet, walked over and scooped our baby into her arms.
That's right, December. Snow!
All the kids exclaimed and ran over to the window, jumping up and down with exuberant enthusiasm. Looks like sledding has been added to today's activities, I drawled.
God bless us, everyone,
Nicholas crowed. I couldn't imagine what else I could possibly be blessed with. I moved to stand behind my wife, slipping my arms around her and nuzzling my nose in her neck. Merry Christmas, baby.
This has been The One I Want for Christmas by Fiona Davenport. Read for you by Avi Page.
read me romance. Read